Welcome to Top Shelf Men. I'm Reese. Today we're going to be talking about why women love communism and why women in power will always push towards socialism, communism, the authoritarian welfare state. As I have stated before on this channel, women love the idea of things that sound good in their head, but are terrible in practice. This is why the powers that be always keep pushing towards more feminism, more gynocentrism, because they understand that women are easy to manipulate with propaganda and social programming. And this also applies to low testosterone males that are effectively taught to think like defective women because their wiring is male, but they're thought to think, oh, well, I had a single mother that raised me, so I must do what's good for all womankind. That's why you get a lot of these soy creatures throughout all of Western civilization. And these conditions allow for women to get voted into very high levels of and positions of authority that push laws and policies that push for, oh, well, people need a little help, which then leads, oh, well, everyone should get help, socialism, and then eventually, oh, we're going to tell you what you need so everyone can be the same, which is communism. And this was very well explained by George Orwell's 1984 with this quote. It was always the women, and above all the young ones, who were the most bigoted adherents of the party, the swallowers of slogans, the amateur spies, and nosers out of unorthodoxy. And this is why all women, whether they call themselves liberal, conservative, deep down in their hearts, they are communists. They are authoritarians because they are wired to raise and control children. But with the single motherhood, with the childlessness of modern society's Western women, they put that energy towards being the mothers of societies, thus pushing really bad policies. You can see this with single mother and or absent father households where the mothers don't know how to raise the kids. All they know how to do is yell and scream. They don't actually teach the kids anything. They don't know how to reward them, but then the mother will turn around and tell them, you are good just the way you are. You don't have to put effort into anything. Somebody will come along and love you just because of the way you are, the way I do, because women are solipsistic, right? And then these boys grow up into being soy creatures in which they are like, hurrah, women need a turn. We have to vote more women into power because they are just perpetuating their household into society, into the state now becoming their mother. That's why they are all gung-ho for, oh, it's women's turn. When reality, that's the only truth they know, being ruled by women. Then I saw this article that reminded me why women love communism. Supreme Court bar exam will no longer be required to become attorney in Washington state. The bar exam will no longer be required to become a lawyer in Washington, the state Supreme Court ruled in a pair of orders Friday. The court approved alternative ways to show competency and earn a law license after appointing a task force to examine the issue in 2020. The Bar Licensure Task Force found that the traditional exam disproportionately and unnecessarily blocks marginalized groups from becoming practicing attorneys and is at best minimally effective for ensuring competency, according to a news release from the Washington Administrative Office of the Courts. Washington is the second state to not require the bar exam, following Oregon, another communist bastion, which implemented the change at the start of this year. Other states, including Minnesota, Nevada, South Dakota, and Utah, are examining alternative pathways to licensure. So immediately I got curious. Well, these are, again, they want more, DEI, right? So this made me go look to see what is the makeup of this actual Supreme Court of Washington. I was curious. And to my surprise, behold, this is the Washington Supreme Court. You see a gaggle of women and two betas in the middle. And then I wonder whose idea was this? And just look at the people representing you. This is whose idea it was. This article then reminded me of a story I had heard back when I was a security guard over a decade ago from a Cuban coworker of mine. We had been having lunch and we were talking about stuff, and eventually the conversation led to him telling me that in Communist Cuba, Fidel Castro's Cuba, there were doctors that were barely literate. They could barely read or write in Spanish. And I said to him, that doesn't make any sense. How is it that they can get through medical school? They can pass the exams. They can basically show that they are qualified to work on people's bodies, on their health. And he said that didn't matter. What mattered was that, one, they had the right connection. They had a family member or somebody that was high enough up in the communist government to give them the opportunity. And then the only requirement was that they were loyal to the Communist Party, they were loyal to Fidel, and that loyalty was all that was required. That was the only qualification necessary for them to practice medicine. So I replied to him, that must have been a disaster. There must have been high mortality rates, very poor medical care, because again, you have unqualified people working on other people's health. And he said, yes. And I said, but how does that work for the government, for all the high ups? Because of course, there's a hierarchy, even though everyone's the same, right? And he said, well, yes and no. The normal people had to deal with these doctors that were barely literate, but all the elites, all the government employees, all the people that were deep in the party, they had their own special doctors that were educated in Europe. So they would get the youngest, brightest minds, and they would fly them overseas and educate them overseas with European doctors. And then once they went through all the credentialing, through the actual practical exams, and they were properly qualified, then they would come back and work exclusively as doctors for the party, for Fidel's Communist Party. So that got me thinking about systems. When people that are not qualified, when they know that they are frauds, when they are put in high positions of authority or high positions of prestige, such as doctors, lawyers, lawmakers, they are kind of put in a conundrum where they know they're not qualified for the position because, again, they're going to have other colleagues that are going to be smarter, brighter, and know more than them, and they're not going to quite match up, which is why they fail these exams that qualify them. So then at that point, they're put in a conundrum. They have to support a system that supports them being in positions of authority without having earned it. And as more states adopt these kinds of policies for equity, you're going to have more and more people invested in a system that keeps the sham alive, where they will have to do whatever it takes to keep their position of authority, to keep their position of status or prestige, because they know they didn't earn it and they're not qualified for it. And I think this is why you get all this lawfare. You have people that because of equity, because they're oppressed minorities, whatever that means at this point, they are put in high positions of power in which they're doing outrageous, illegal things using lawfare against political enemies, against people that honestly push traditional masculinity. And that's why they are so dangerous, because these people know that they are in their positions of authority because of a scam. They're not qualified. They don't deserve these positions. But because they're there, they will do whatever they are told to do to keep these high positions of authority, because otherwise they go back to being nothing. And this goes back to the problem of women being in power. Left or right, both sides pedestalize women. And as long as you keep putting women in positions of authority, women will keep using that authority to do things that sound good to them in theory, but are terrible in practice. That is why I think that it doesn't really matter who is in power, because the left will be pushing us towards communist authoritarianism, and the right will just inch us along as they keep going for rah-rah, more women in politics, more women in positions of authority, more women in positions of power. But that's my opinion. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this message interesting, share, leave a like. It'll help the channel grow. Let me know what your experiences have been and what your thoughts are on this subject matter. This is Reese. See you next video, guys. Peace.